Yes, but first of all, let me also outline some memories to be recorded in today's meeting and for everyone to know. Around 1990, I live very close to Ormilia in Moudania, Chalkidiki, and I'm very close to that monastery. I have bonds with this monastery of Ormilia. So the first refugees start coming, Serbs, Bulgarians, and then gradually Romanians, and later on Russians and all others, Georgians and all the others. It was in the year 1990. So they come to the monastery of Ormilia. And the late Serapion tells me, Kostas, the monastery is in a great disruption, unrest, because they come here, they bring along their sufferings, their concerns and anxieties. They are trying to pray, they are trying to find some comfort. They have their families, their children. The monastery is quite troubled. The nuns cannot follow their hesychastic tradition because there is always noise around. So I'm talking with the father abbot of Simonos Petra, Emilianus, on Mount Athos, and we are trying somehow to address the situation. So we had that thought in the Center Panagia Philanthropini, which had also medical activities. We decided to establish there a center for Orthodoxy. So we started, this journey. We started discussing and planning and designing how to set up this center. This is interesting for those of you who know how life is in a monastery. So if you know how life is there, you can realize the unrest among nuns from all the input and the stimuli they get. This is something that you can sense, you can feel when you walk into the monastery. And people kept on coming. And then the government of Mitsotakis and Thanasis Tsaldaris with Vasilis Korahais made the decision to set up the committee. Where is Thanasis Angelopoulos? I don't see him in the room. Anyway, they decided to set up the committee for Orthodoxy and religions. Be careful here, because everything has a symbolism. They said religions and Orthodoxy, Committee for Religions and Orthodoxy. So the word religions was first in the name of the committee. That was the title, the name of the committee. And then Serapion is informed about the establishment of this committee. Papa Themelis was then in the main opposition party, and he invited him in Athens. So he saw them in a meeting, he found them meeting. So the anxiety of Serapion was matched with the anxiety of the Greek Parliament, and this is how Ormilia was linked to the committee. And this is how we decided to do something. So if you try to find the symbolism, just think carefully. It is the concern, the anxiety of the politicians with the concerns and the anxiety of the church. If we wanted to give some name, some title. And this leads to this first decision, the decision to hold that first meeting. You see, now we have all been used to our mobile phones and so on. But back then, in order to contact all those people, Miliou was the director back then. She was newly hired in the parliament. So in order to contact all those people, I had a gastric bleeding that was caused because of my anxiety, my stress. It was very stressful to reach all those parliaments and find the Orthodox members. What parliaments, what churches, how were we supposed to reach them? There was no phone. We had to reach them by fax. Anyway, for 1 year and a half, we were trying to reach all those people. And at the end, when we decided, when the conference was feasible and when we managed to invite those people, that was the first miracle. And then, the second important thing, the law. How competent he was and how well he had organized everything. So the law and his office 30 years ago sent a representative of the committee and a vice speaker of the parliament, Madame Lafontaine. And later on, she even became the president of the European Parliament for a few months. And one more thing, in that gathering, all political parties came to Ormelia or went through Ormelia. First of all, the left, Lendakis. God rest him. He was a very important politician, a prestigious politician of the left, a philologist with a very clear opinion. Kirkos, George Papandreou, they all came here in those days in order to show their concern. And Thanasis Angelopoulos may add more. Kostas Cholevas, I may be forgetting some names. Anyway, I'm saying, listen to that and let our friends write it down. My dear friend and brother, Tsotrich, it was especially your concern, the anxiety of the Serbian people, and it was actually your suffering and your concern that troubled us and pushed us to take initiatives. Because every single day we would see trucks departing from the monastery and all other monasteries of Greece to help to transfer aid for our brothers, the Serbs. The Greek Parliament and the Church of Greece have been very successful in providing this aid. This is something that we have to keep in mind, and it has to be written in history. We should not, say very lightly that politicians are this or that. Well, in that case, they acted responsibly, either if we like it or not. Now, about the law. Then, the law was a very faithful Catholic, and he had Jérôme Dignon, who had been entrusted with the most important assignment, a cellule de prospective, a cell of perspective. He had established, and he wanted the Christianity component to exist in Europe. So he decided to visit Greece, Mount Athos, to see what is going on in Greece and what is the situation in terms of the ecclesiastic affairs. So they called us on the phone and they prepared a trip of 8 people, a delegation from Cellule de Perspective, some 8 people who were not related to the matter. But Jérôme Aignan, I saw in his CV that he had 8 children. I saw that before meeting him. And he asked me, do you think I can get the blessing from Ephraim Katuniakotis? And I asked him, you are in Brussels. How do you know Ephraim? Because he was not famous back then. Now I think he has become a saint. Yes, he has been canonized, yeah. But back then he was not known. So with Justinus of Simonos Petras, we were discussing how to find him, how to find this old father who was living in Katunakia, Mount Athos. It was very difficult to reach him and find him. And now, listen to the coincidence. We went on board a vessel in order to sail around Mount Athos, just as a sightseeing for them to see Mount Athos from the boat. And Ephraim was on the boat, on the vessel. And we said to Vignon, he's here, he's on the boat. And he was a very slim person, a very modest, humble person. And he asked for his blessing. But the old father, Ephraim, thought that he was a Catholic and he knew that he had to handle this very cautiously. So he looked at his assistant, and Justinus said, Father, Vignon wants to have your blessing. And his assistant nodded positively. And the guy, Vignon, and kissed the hand of Ephraim Katuniakotis. And he said, Kostas, whatever you want, we are going to stand by your side. And then we contacted France, the bishop in France, and we had permanent contacts with Ephraim. In 1994, when we had the founding act in Μεγάλη Βρετανία Hotel, Valerios Alexeyev came from Russia, and Viktor Zorgachev. Viktor Zorgachev was the third in the hierarchy of the Communist Party. The Communist Party post-communism. And we were surprised that all of a sudden we received the third in the hierarchy of the Communist Party. So we were wondering what we were supposed to do. Let me inform you that Viktor Zorgachev, may God rest his soul, was an excellent politician. He did nothing that could be questioned. He would only cross himself, and he was very careful, very cautious in the church. So it was obvious that he was not approaching this matter through a personal relation with God, but through a political opinion, political stance. And we had a perfect cooperation. And then Valery Alexeyev, a very strong personality. We worked together for many, many years, 25 years. He was a difficult person, but committed to our objectives. We would argue and fight every single day on anything. We would argue on the phone all the time, but the outcome was always positive. We would always reach a solution. And then our cooperation with the University of Thessaloniki, the Aristotelian University, that was one of our first partnerships. The first one with Yannis Petru and Christos Tsironis. You had graduated back then, right? Yes. And now, listen, there was an issue raised. What are theologians doing, those who graduate from the schools of theology? That was the matter, the question. Because they had a very serious problem finding a job. And so we drafted a very important guide, a manual for the training of theologians in Europe about multiculturalism and the possibility to find a job in municipalities or several entities to contribute in understanding the coexistence of different trends, an innovative program with partners from all around the world, Denmark and everywhere. And then another important cooperation with Crete, Konstantinos. Your late Metropolitan was here. You said it yesterday. You pointed out that the Major Galanakis and Alekos Papaderos were here. And let's say one more thing, because we have to be fair. Alekos, by himself, independently, had started an effort of dialogue between the political parties and the academy, the Orthodox Academy of Crete. That was being done slowly, but we became part of this effort. And Alekos has supported us a lot concerning the Committee on Education. And we published a brilliant text about the education of young people and their relations with Orthodoxy. And recently with the University of Athens, Maximos has signed an MOU, and this volume was published in partnership with the University of Athens. And one more thing that I would like to recall.
It was the decision to have in our organization the pro-Chalcedonians. There were reactions because they told us that we would be considered as heretics for doing that. However, Bartholomew, we met at some point. I don't remember who I was with, but he told me that was an amazing thing that you did to include the pro-Chalcedonians, because we have lost contact with those brothers of ours. They were, of course, there were divergent views about them. Now, with the Catholics, this is something recent. Letizia, I'm talking about you now. It started only some years ago, and it is really going well. I think this is the future, to find subjects of common interest and bear witness. And I shall stop here. Let us not become emotional, because we are at a sensitive age, and we must guard ourselves from getting too emotional. Ambrosius, yes, Metropolitan of Helsinki. Can you hear me? Yes, he was here, a very young bishop then, so we can hear him, and then Father Manolis and his recollections from that time. So, yes, please.
I was allowed to come to the first meeting in Ormilia in '93, and it was an exciting process how I was sent here by our church and by the Speaker of the Finnish Parliament, because originally there was not interest in the meeting of Ormilia at all in the parliament in Finland, but finally we managed to get the two important MPs here. One was Vice Speaker of the Parliament, and then I was accompanying and helping them a bit, and actively participating also here in Ormilia already at that time. And since then, for 30 years, I've had very fruitful cooperation and building networks with this organization in Finnish context, and informing the Finnish politicians about the work of this institution. And of course, when we came to Ormilia, that was soon after the collapse of communism, and there were many Orthodox MPs from Eastern Europe who had not got into contact with any other Orthodox members of parliament in other countries. And already from this perspective, the meeting was very important. And I felt that that the whole meeting in Ormilia was a charismatic event, I would say. There's a lot of inspiration, optimism and hope concerning common mission of Orthodoxy in post-communist Europe, and a great deal of open and fraternal, I must say sisterly discussions, officially in the plenary, but also informally on seaside, and sitting together drinking good Greek wine in the evenings. And it was also, in some important sense, I say this from the perspective of the church, it was important for the churches to emphasize our common interests and the need and importance of dialogue between the members of parliament and representatives of the churches. And of course, in some sense, in some important sense, members of parliament remind our churchmen about the importance of this kind of social and political and social and ethical aspects of Christianity through your own work and through the questions you struggle with, and through the aims you pursue, and which certainly are in full harmony with our best Orthodox tradition. And one important aspect from Finnish viewpoint and from the viewpoint of the Finnish church was this, that there were many MPs from countries where they have a great majority Orthodox churches. But then we also had here meeting representatives from those countries, parliamentarians from those countries where there are very small minority churches, not only Finland, but Slovakia and others. And we could sit around the same tables, and that was important. And then also we had more time than this during this conference for informal discussions and sitting together, and we had two important pilgrimages also. They are important for building mutual relations, mutual fellowship and friendship. We went already then to the convent of Ormilia, and we experienced how the nuns radiated the spirit, radiated angelic life, foretaste of paradise in a way. I'm sure we experience tomorrow the same thing. And then perhaps even more exceptional was the boat trip to the Holy Mountain, Mount Athos. And the fathers, the monks of the monasteries brought the relics of many saints to the boat as well, so that even all the ladies who accompanied us and were part of the delegations could venerate the relics equally as we did. Thanks. Great event.
Papamanoli.
Ή το δεύτερο ή το τρίτο.
It was the second or third meeting, Father Emmanuel Klapsis. The second or third meeting I participated in this conference. I urged and with the blessings of Jacob, he told me, Manoli, you're interested in politics and in society, and this is an opportunity for you to see that there are others that are concerned about the witness of the Church in the realm of politics. And when I came, I was surprised because I had never seen theologians, priests, primates and politicians, especially progressive politicians, take part in such a meeting. I was trying to converse with them, to listen to them, and I must say that they gave me food for thought. They encouraged me to continue, to start on a course about the role of the Church in the public space, in the public sphere. And I must say that I owe a lot to that first meeting. Many years later, when I was dean in the Theologian School of the Holy Cross, we had organized a conference of the Interparliamentary Committee where we discussed the role of the Church in the public sphere. That was a very important conference. The Archbishop of America, Dimitrios, attended the works. He was there in all the sessions, and I was taught a lot from these meetings. I was inspired by these meetings, and the Parliamentary Committee is something very hopeful, because it is a forum for dialogue. It is a place where the anxiety of the theologians, the Church, and of the politicians is shared, and in order their endeavors to bring about a less barbaric society, society governed by peace and love. I met theologians, Iobria, I remember, who, the Romanian, who impressed me because he spoke about missionary, that was a mission of responsibility. I remember George Papandreou, who also participated. I have one thing to say. I want to thank you all for having given me the opportunity to participate in a dialogue that was a trigger for thinking, for reflection in the modern world. Thank you very much. Now I think we need to give the floor to the professor who was the very soul behind the Committee of Religion and Orthodoxy in the Greek Parliament, and he was there until 1994 and participated in the first setting up of the organization in Ormylia and in Athens. Thanasis, you have the floor.
Respectable audience, Well, I have to answer to a question how these two institutions were set up, the Interparliamentary Committee, the Parliamentary Committee of the Greek Parliament, and the Interparliamentary Assembly on Orthodoxy. In 1989 until 1991, we witnessed those radical changes. The entire system against the god of the real socialism collapsed like a paper tower. And that was being said back then. And of course, I thought of the prophecy back then, 25 years ago, of the great philosopher, theologian, historical and political analyst, and canonized by the Church, Saint Justin Popovic of Serbia. From 1963 until 1967, I was a PhD student in Serbia. And of course, that person who is a saint today was a persona non grata for the regime. He was isolated in a monastery near Valjevo, that was like prison. And myself, according to the advice of my professor, Mr. Karmiris, who was a fellow student with St. Justinus in Athens because he was doing his thesis there, I tried to see him, to go there and meet him, but the professor said it has to be a secret. You have to go there by yourself. Don't tell anyone because you may be arrested and deported and you will miss your studies. 4 months later, without saying anything to anybody, on the 25th of March 1964, without telling anybody, I reached the Valjevo and I walked 2 hours on the mountain on a narrow path. It started getting dark. I could hear the wolves. So after 2 hours, I reached the monastery. I knocked on the door, and none asked me, who are you? What are you doing here? I said, I'm a Greek, and I want to see Father Justinus. So I walked in. I had not said anything to anybody. So he came out and he said, you are Thanasis Angelopoulos, my child, and I was waiting for you. So that was our first contact. And when from Athens, from my professor, I was asked to raise the question to him, what was his opinion about the geopolitical and religious situation during that period. In 1965, he said the following to me. He said, please convey to Athens that, of course, I won't be alive then, but you will be alive, the great fall, because systems that are based on tyranny of peoples and a fake ideology, sooner or later collapse like paper towers. So I did convey his message, and of course, in 1989, 1990, with all those stories and that fall, the government in Greece, and he even told me that Greece will be invited to play a significant role as an Orthodox country, as a womb of Orthodoxy, and I will come back to this about the contemporary times. So I did convey the message where I had to, and 25 years later we had such developments. In 1979, Justinus passed away, and then in 1989, 1990, we had this whole situation. So when Mitsotakis was the prime minister, the politician George Kostas was the minister for Macedonia and Thrace, and he invited me as a special advisor on religious matters because I was aware of the Balkan matters. I was doctor in Belgrade. I knew the language. So we would travel all around the Balkans, meet ministers, prime ministers, without any budget. We didn't have a cent in our pocket. So the Greek government, through the Ministry for Macedonia and Thrace, with Mr. Kostas and with me as an advisor, would help them financially. We would help the governments. And the Church of Greece and the dioceses and the monasteries would send whole trucks full of food and other aid to those people. And then Mr. Kostas, that great patriot, said, well, you needed to make some programs for the world of Orthodoxy in the Balkans today. And indeed, around 1991, 1992, on a TV channel, I coordinated a series of shows, programs titled The World of Orthodoxy in the Balkans Today. Mr. Kostas was there. It was around 10 shows. And one morning, I received a phone call from Vasilis Korahais. He said, Professor, we've heard so many nice things and we have some thoughts about it. We want you in the parliament. And since I am the competent person, I will appoint you as a special advisor on orthodoxy matters in the Hellenic Parliament, because we have to set up something that we have in mind. I said, okay, I am available. And it was end of 1991, so I went to the parliament and we started an effort about all this, which Mr. Mygdalis described very well, and congratulations. It's great for one person to go through the entire journey. There has to be one constant presence throughout the course of time. So he said, you know, for this project, we need the support of the church. So as a professor for church history and as a friend of the Archbishop, I used to be the Secretary General for Religions in the first period of Archbishop Seraphim, and I knew him very well. So he said we have to have the church by our side, and of course also the Ecumenical Patriarchate. So I went to Archbishop Seraphim, and he said, what does Orthodoxy has to do with politics? What's the relation between politics and Orthodoxy? And I remember now, before the elections, what the politicians were saying, what's the link between Orthodoxy and politics they were saying. So I said, it's Kostas. And the Archbishop said, okay, I know him very well, let's invite him for a meeting. So the minister was invited to come to Athens. And the Prime Minister Konstantinos Mitsotakis was also informed and invited, and we had a meeting. And the Prime Minister also called on the phone, and the Archbishop accepted all that in the spirit of solidarity in the society. On a certain moment, Korahais was there. He said, the Archbishop said, but I have a demand. You see what is happening in Bosnia. Orthodox against Roman Catholics, Roman Catholics against the Orthodox, and Muslims against everyone. And he said, religious is a fruitful dimension, especially Orthodoxy, and the national identity too. But when they are two extremes, this is the worst. So I want you to establish something in Thessaloniki to examine this a foundation to explore this relation, and this is the foundation that we did establish, and we have this year our 30th anniversary. And the Archbishop promised the scholarships for this foundation, and this is how we set it up, and this year we are also celebrating our 30th anniversary. But we had to go there, and we also had to go and inform the Patriarchate. The Patriarch was my personal friend, and he still is. I was an archon of the Patriarchate, so I traveled to Istanbul. No, it was Bartholomew. It was 1992. Bartholomew was the Patriarch. So I raised the matter with him. He agreed. But he did have some reservations, some hesitations about racism and so on, the same as the Archbishop. So he did send the message, but not a delegation. It was the political leaders, actually, who pioneered. The President of the Republic, Konstantinos Karamanlis, the Prime Minister, and Andreas Papandreou. And please allow me to read out some passages from the messages. It's only 5 minutes. I'll be done in 5 or 10 minutes. President of the Republic, Konstantinos Karamanlis, 1993. In today's times of radical developments and restructuring, the mission of Orthodoxy becomes more relevant and necessary than ever because it is a mission of peace, love, and cooperation among peoples of the world. That was the Prime Minister Konstantinos Mitsotakis. Orthodoxy as a religion, as a culture, and as a way of life links us, has been linking us more than 1,000 years. Then, leader of the main opposition party, Andreas Papandreou, which I like most because it reminds me of the prophecy from Justin Popovich. Orthodoxy is the womb of peoples in the Balkans and Eastern Europe. It's our common matrix. It's the element of our identity. It is the uniting element. And it is the power to fight against the common enemies and opponents and any those who are enemies to Orthodoxy and Orthodox people. Those are very important texts. And now the message from the Ecumenical Patriarch, and then I will read out the message of Seraphim. Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. Apologies, this is in a very difficult language used by the Patriarch. He's reading out the message. We should have the message in the interpretation booths. Apologies. He is reading extremely fast the message of the Ecumenical Patriarch in a very, very difficult language. Seraphim, the Orthodox Church, applying in its life the Lord's message, blesses initiatives, personal and collective initiatives, even more parliamentary initiatives in favor of the peaceful coexistence and perspective of peoples, irrespective of language and nation, because it supports the peaceful identity of its faithful and rejects ethno-racism as a schism and a heresis. And the last difficulty in 1992-1993 was from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the division for the churches. They had some concerns over this project. But later on, that concern became very constructive, as I will analyze. This historical division for the churches of the Foreign Ministry has been reserved against the project of the Greek Parliament to establish the Committee on Religions and Orthodoxy. Mr. Korachais and myself worked hard to convince those in charge in that division about the necessity for this new institution, and we were proven right. So this division, on its own initiative, has changed its name. Instead of Division for the Churches, it became General Directorate for Religious Affairs. So it had broader tasks, and the Parliamentary Committee for Orthodoxy has added on its name the word religions, and it became the Parliamentary Committee for Religions and Orthodoxy. That's how it all started, and then the common journey was secured for the benefit of both institutions in the new geopolitical and religious reality of 1993. Thank you very much. Thank you, Thanasis. Now, if we go into the details, it would be very interesting to narrate how this conference was organized, the small details, how we concluded with a declaration. Anyway, Kostas Cholevas now has the floor. Thank you for the invitation. So 30 years. A few months before the conference in Ormylia, I had started writing articles in the review Οικονομικός Ταχυδρόμος. Yannis Marinos was the chief editor, and I was mostly writing articles on Balkan matters, also giving the ecclesiastic dimension, which was very rare back then for articles in big newspapers and political reviews. So I accepted a phone call from the late Vasilis Korachais, and he said, please come and help and express your thoughts and attend the conference that we are going to organize. When I asked him what is the reasoning, the rationale, he said, I read a very nice article from Spiros Alexiou in Kathimerini that was a top quality article that a journalist of a church reporting, a well-known journalist, was giving actually guidelines what needs to be done for parliaments to help in the cooperation among Orthodox MPs and also mutual understanding among peoples. I also knew Stelios Papathemelis, and I do honor those two pioneers, Vasilis Korachais and Papathemelis, because they have both given great struggles. So let me recall some names from Ormylia, 1993. The message of the Archbishop Seraphim was read by the Metropolitan of Cassandria, because it was in that bishopry, and the Church of Greece was represented by two people who are not in life. The then Archmandrite Ambrosios Yakalis, then Metropolitan of Kozani. He has passed away. Very nice speeches. He was responsible for the Foundation for Youth in the Diocese of Athens, and he was working very much on this topic. And the well-known journalist, the late Ioannis Sarakiotis, made speeches in that conference. Let me remind you of an incident that was quite impressive and disrupting, if you like, for the climate of the conference. On the second day, we saw a clergyman running in, quite unrest, and he was trying to speak to Thanasis Chalkias and Nikos Katsaros, who were in the bureau. The last one was representing Larissa, and I think he was also the deputy speaker of the parliament. They didn't allow him to speak immediately, but then they explained that he was the Chrysostomos Maïndonis, the Archmandrite, who had been expelled because he had been invited to help Anastasios in Albania to organize the Orthodox Church, but for some reasons he was arrested by the police and was led to the borders and expelled. And he was there because he wanted to express his complaint. That was a witness of the climate of that era in the Balkans. Now he's a bishop in the Patriarchate of Alexandria. He's the Bishop of Bugoba. I was impressed also to see the knowledge of Ioannis Zigdis, a politician. He delivered great lectures. He got great knowledge of history and theology. And then Alekos Papadopoulos, still in life, He also made a very nice speech, I remember. We were moved by the hospitality of the monastery of Ormilia, the Annunciation of Virgin Mary, and the Simonopetra monastery. The hospitality was excellent, and something that participants liked very much from all countries was the visit. I remember that a bus took us to Thessaloniki, and we visited the Archaeological Museum of Thessaloniki, where the skeleton of Philippus and the other treasures were exhibited there. Very important exhibits for the history of the entire area and the history of Macedonia. So to conclude, what are my impressions? Well, I had imagined the people of the Balkan countries completely different before joining that conference in Ormilia. And when I went back and started writing my articles again, I had a completely different picture. Much better, of course, and much more real. Because when you only read history, theology, ecclesiology, or politics, if you only read it through books or articles, and then if you get to know those people, meet those people in person, those people who are active in the events, your idea, the picture is completely changing. So I'm very glad that we have this institution. I congratulate all those who have continued this effort, because Mr. Charakopoulos, Mr. Mygdalis, and dear friends, this contact among people, this interpersonal communication gives people the real picture of the situation. So any misunderstanding is eliminated. You learn about the real problems. So when you write anything, you can be closer to truth. So please go on having this contact among people, this communion among people. And I'm sure that in the next years, the I.A.O. will help in conciliation and mutual understanding, because now we live in times when we need synthesis and not antithesis. We need convergence and not divergence. You're absolutely right. This is very correct. Personal relation is very important. The Egyptian MP who is here was telling me this morning, apologies, I don't remember the name. She said it's the third time I'm taking part in the I.A.O. meeting, and I feel as if I have known you for many, many years. It's exactly this personal relation that helps us understand each other and overcome any frictions. So you're absolutely right. Another person who was here back then was the abbot of the Holy Monastery of Kikos on Cyprus. He was an archmandrite, a young one. Christos.
Λοιπόν, και έτσι περιποιημένος, θυμάμαι, είχε κάνει μια τοποθέτηση.
I remember that he made a very remarkable speech, a very nice voice.
Είπε ότι δεν μπορούσε σήμερα να είναι και έστειλε τον Χρήστο τον Οικονόμου.
He sent Christos Ikonomou because he could not join us today.
Να τον ακούσουμε λοιπόν.
So let's hear what he has to say.
Κύριος Μygdalis, επειδή τα ξέρει όλα, νομίζει ότι...
Mr. Mygdalis, because he knows everything, he thinks that everybody knows everything. Convent Kikou is in Cyprus, for those who do not know it.
Ότι όλοι γνωρίζουν τη μονή Κίκου.
Well, I believe everybody knows where the Kikou monastery is. And the Metropolitan Niceforos of Kikou, and because his social work touches the countries of all participants in the conference today. And they have probably heard that there are also methods of the Kikou monastery. This is very important because the work of the Kikou monastery is actually worldwide known. Indeed, in 1993, I was here too with Niceforos, Metropolitan of Kikou and Telirias, and you know, Mr. Mygdalis, that Niceforos loves this organization, as well as do the members of parliament in Cyprus. We heard Mr. Leonidou, and he is also very interested in the developments and evolution of this international organization now. And he is a scholar, and of course he's always at your service. Should you need anything, should the I.A.O. need something in order to be able to carry on, to continue. It started in Greece and became international. See all these people here today.
Η οποία πραγματοποιήθηκε της διακοινοβουλευτικής συνέλευσης.
Contribution of the I.A.O. in Orthodoxy is a fact, and radiation is international. Many people have worked for the organization, and they deserve our congratulations. And this is a work that is fully and wholeheartedly supported by Metropolitan Niceforos. Back then he was an abbot. He became abbot very, very young, when he was 32. And he was extremely disappointed, Mr. Mygdalis, for not being able to attend today, because it is the commemoration of the Turkish invasion these days, and he has to be there. And in conclusion, I would like to say that this institution has the full support of Metropolitan of Kikou and Telirias on all levels. President Mr. Mygdalis and all others present here. Thank you very much. Let me also say, Thanasis, listen to me, that I spoke with Ireneos Boulovich. He promised that he would come. His contribution was very important, but he had a back problem which did not allow him to come. He had really supported, he had backed us up very much then. When we went to the Holy Mount, Korachais had really insisted on going there, and they received us outside the Xenophontos monastery. They came down to the beach, and then we went back up to the monastery. There was a divine liturgy. They gave us coffee, and Ioannis Hadjifotis, God bless his soul. And I'm telling you, Thanasis and Kostas, the great contribution of Spiros Alexiou, we must never forget him. He was a pioneer in this whole story. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for this time allotted to memory. Thank you all for having made us wiser with your memories from 1993. All of us who were not there then are grateful to you for this trip that you started back then and keep going. You opened up a very important chapter in history, not only for the Orthodox in the Balkans, but everywhere in the world. And I think that tomorrow, when we find ourselves in the convent of Ormilia, we need to light a candle in the memory of all those who are not with us today, but who worked for this institution in the last 30 years. Yes, Mr. Angelopoulos, let me introduce the younger member here that is also the future of the I.A.O. Are you going to make an MP out of him? Yes, Mr. Angelopoulos, and who else? Christos Ikonomou. Yes, you see, we, on the occasion of this anniversary session, we have printed out an engraving we found in the Simonos Petra Monastery. It's an engraving from the Holy Sepulchre, and we wanted to give you a copy, Mr. Angelopoulos, and one to you, Mr. Ikonomou. All the others have already received it.